Released in 1975, Salem's Lot is the second novel released by Stephen King. It is about the infestation of vampires in a small town, and he has in the past cited it to be his favourite written work by himself. It is also, if we're looking at lists of King's greatest work, often right up there in the top 5. So this is about as close as it gets to what we could consider indispensable reading for horror fans. I'm sure there are many other books similar to it in terms of structure, but what Salem's Lot reminded me most of in terms of my modest library of what I've read would be Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, which had short chapters, quick paced, and then the next chapter you were following different characters. It was a different scenario, which, as I say, it gave a nice little pace to the story. There were no slow parts. King uses that similar style here in Salem's Lot, which also has the pro of, even in books we like, you'll often get a slow chapter here and there which you have to trudge through. You have to follow a character or a task or whatever they're doing. Maybe it's even an introspection they're having. You find yourself zoning out. You don't have that at all here because this is rapid fire, it's a quick pace, and it's definitely one of the benefits. The main character, Ben Mears, is a writer who used to live here as a kid. He saw some pretty weird things. Now he's back again. He's drawn some inspiration from this Marsden house, which some strange character called Richard Straker has purchased and is using for his furnishing business. But as things start to go bump in the night and people start to go missing, Ben is just really at the front of a collection of people he gets with as the main character, but it's more the survival of a collection of, say, 5 or 6 different people who are fleshed out enough to feel like real characters, but nobody's particularly heroic enough or anything to make you feel particularly safe. These feel like very much disposable characters, likeable and very much three-dimensional, but they can be taken out, and they do start to get taken out at unusual times as well. It doesn't necessarily follow a obvious arc, this, in terms of who you think is a valuable character when you think they're going to die. One of the main characters who Ben has a crush on is basically is his girlfriend for a time, Susan Norton. She ends up getting turned into a vampire about halfway through, so this is one of the great plot little decisions, I guess you could say, that King decided to take in this. And it gives it just more of a volatile, anything can go, anyone can get taken out, life is particularly cruel type atmosphere. As I mentioned, there is a character, Richard Straker, who ostensibly buys the Marsden house for the purpose of an antiques and furniture business. He is the only real three-dimensional vampire in this story, and is easily, for me, the best character in the book. King describes this not particularly good-looking guy, fairly tall, a bit gaunt, bald or losing his hair, but he talks about how women in the town have spoken about how there's something strangely alluring about him, so he hints at those hypnotic vampire qualities, which is very cool. He's the only vampire really that we get a flavour of what his demeanour's like, what he looks like, the one you can only really conjure up what would it be like to face him or be in his presence. So an excellent character, but as I say, the only real proper vampire in this. There is Barlow, who turns out to be the grand vampire who Straker is in fact working for, but it's Straker for me who had much more of an atmosphere. Descriptions of the weather, describing drunks at bars, and just other little things going on synonymous with small towns and the kind of atmosphere they have. There are some times in this book when King really does flex his literary muscles, so to speak, but in terms of just one image that had the most impact for me, it would again be going back to Richard Straker, the vampire, and when Ben and a few of the other guys, I think it might be Danny Gleek, the young kid, a very resourceful kid who's going along with him, they open the door on somewhere on the lower levels of the Marsden house, and they see that Straker has actually been killed by Barlow. For some reason that escapes me at the moment, but I think he's basically suspended, his throat's been ripped out, and the way he describes how he's been drained of colour and all this is coming out, it's quite a shocking, awesome moment. So the book moves at a good pace, it's got decent characters, it's got plenty of action, it's got nice nods and little discussions about vampire mythology without bogging you down in it too much, just nicely weaves that through, intertwining it with the action. But for me, there was no real one scene where the book really crescendoed and made me just think, this is completely awesome. It was all very solid, it was all very compelling. I like the way Susan dies halfway through, just gives that, as I say, that disposable element. And the ending with Ben and Danny and the way he just tosses the match and sets fire to the place. There was a historic fire in Salem's Lot, and he decides, with the vampires now on the loose, having killed Barlow, let's just torch this motherfucker and kill them. It follows a nice unconventional route, has a real feeling of action about it, but like I say, there was nothing that blew me away. And that's why ultimately I would probably rate Salem's Lot an 8 out of 10.